welcome to my garden. Another week's rolled on, and we're in a slightly different spot. This time it's I'm filming on a Friday, so the weekend revelry has started. Hopefully it doesn't spoil the audio of this video. Anyway, this week I want to talk about PDA, dreaded acronyms. And probably not the one that immediately springs to your mind. Public displays of affection. Although I could definitely do a little lead into that living in Brazil. Sometimes it can be a bit much. Carnival time, certainly. I do remember my dreaded week at the carnival in Salvador, Bahia. And boy, oh boy, public displays of affection. I think the worst scene was round about daybreak, and well, it was just about a porn movie unfolding on the beach promenade. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about another PDA, and just in case you've had problems of a dental kind, and I think there is actually a PDA, which is some sort of surgical procedure or problem of a dental variety. It's not that either. No, the PDA that I want to talk about sort of really got me thinking, and it popped up in a newsletter from Chris Guillebeau. If you're one of the long-standing subscribers, you might recall that he's someone who really played a part in my sort of, not sure what the right word is, transformation. Since I came here, my brother sent me some interesting written material of his about reinventing your life. And he's a very, very interesting person. Originally, he started out blogging on the theme of travel hacking, but he subsequently moved into all sorts of other areas. He takes great pride in mentioning that he's never actually had a real job, so to speak, and currently has a very long-running podcast on side hacks. What's the word? What do you call them? Anyway, side hustles, not hacks. Side hustles. That's what I was thinking of, and that's been going on for some years. Very, very interesting. And he's found a new area that he's branched out into. He's written a lot of very successful books. And in the course of the trials and tribulations of the last decade, he reached certain realizations about himself. One was that he was what I believe, and once again, am I going to mangle the term? Is it neurodivergent? I think that's what they call, or how things are referred to lately. He realized that he was in need of examining, sort of self-examination, and it turns out he has been diagnosed as an adult sufferer of ADHD, which apparently solved all sorts of practical problems and answered a lot of questions that he had about himself, about why he struggled to do certain things, when as such a high-functioning, successful person, he really shouldn't. And consequently, with this sort of personal revelation, he's become interested in the world of mental difficulties, let's call it that, because he's also gone through periods of depression, and he's started a newsletter where he sort of looks at different elements of this. And this week he was talking about a problem that he had, and he's had for a long time, of procrastination. I don't think he's specifically a a chronic procrastinator. He's someone who gets stuff done. He's a very efficient, it seems to me, productive sort of person. But he leaves stuff, kind of personal details that need taking care of. It's the very, very last minute. And he began his newsletter, talking about how he'd failed to renew his driver's license right up until the very last moment, which, as it happened, turns out to be 1 year after it expires. Anyway, he did. And digging a little bit further, he realized that he had many of the symptoms of, or ticked many of the boxes of PDA. And this is something that kind of piqued my interest, because I thought, well, I've been going through those sort of challenges as well. Renewing my passport, submitting my income tax return, actually submitting any documents. And I'd always put it down to other reasons, laziness or what have you. But there's a thing called PDA, pathological demand avoidance. Well, that's very interesting. That certainly resonates with me. But then I read a little further, and it turns out that PDA is a very unusual, and it is now a condition, certainly a recognized condition in the United Kingdom. Not so much in America yet. It hasn't. I'm not sure if it's found its way into the official psychiatric diagnostic manuals. But it's a thing, and it's a thing as part of what is now called the sort of autistic syndrome spectrum. Good Lord. This is starting to get a little interesting. Now, it's probably worth saying a few things, just background information, that depending on what you have or haven't read, autism is something that has undergone a bit of a repackaging, certainly undergone a bit of a rebranding. I mean, you can't go anywhere on TikTok without sort of people, say, coming out. It's identifying, self-diagnosing and identifying. But it is kind of like a sort of announcement to the world. Now, part of that, of course, has something to do with a tendency towards assuming identities. And I think there is an element of at least some people on social media who look at things that are serious, present serious difficulties for functioning of many people in the world, and people just identify with it because well, they choose to, and for whatever reasons. And certainly if you move towards more conservative critiques of social media, this is another of the beginnings of the end, of the collapse of civilized society. But even if we don't take that kind of radical stance, I think there are some folk who over-identify, let's call it that. Things have changed. For example, there was a spell when Asperger's became a thing, and much more people became more comfortable talking about it. It was viewed in a less critical light. I mean, as compared to when I was a kid, you know, and autism was sort of something that kind of made its breakout, if one were to call it that, with the film Rain Man, and the rather dramatically named idiot savants. And as someone in a video that I've watched recently said, well, that name got changed because who really likes to be called an idiot? But now actually Asperger's, for example, isn't seen as a separate thing. It's a different collection of symptoms on the autistic spectrum. And I think that word spectrum as well is a little misleading when, based on my limited research, and obviously correct me in the comments if I get this terribly wrong, but the idea of spectrum for some people is it's a sort of a grayscale from 0 to 1. So you might be very Asperger's, strongly, mildly, likely. It's not like that. It's not, some number between 0 and 100%. The explanation that I saw about this when I kind of dug in suggests that there's a string of different symptoms that may present themselves in a person. And you are more aligned with some than others. And in the end, this sort of your position isn't so much a point on a line, but it's a sort of star-shaped profile. I see the same thing in analysis of football players on YouTube videos that are stats driven, and probably a good point to make here is that a lot of these symptoms, and certainly pathological demand avoidance, they're things that many people will naturally identify with. I think a lot of people don't like being told what to do. But pathological demand avoidance is a whole nother ball game. Pathological demand avoidance is when you go to quite extraordinary lengths to avoid meeting demands placed on you. They could be basic demands such as things for daily functioning, like brushing your teeth. If one had a child who has difficulties like this, well, that's something you're going to have to deal with, and deal with differently to other things on the autistic spectrum. And I've been kind of mentioning this, and I suppose as I near the end of this video, I sort of wandered a little bit. I don't think that places me on anywhere on some sort of spectrum that I've been talking about, but it's certainly true for me. And I don't want to suggest at the moment that this video, and perhaps any video that follows up, is an attempt for me to say, hello world, I've discovered I'm autistic. That is not what I want to suggest. However, listening to Chris Guillebeau talk about this, and I don't think he was suggesting that either, two things kind of became very apparent to me. That perhaps things that I dismiss as just, in quite a negative way about myself, I just am too lazy to do certain things, and I just to put them off to the last minute. Something deeper may be at play. And And I think actually the other point is that I realise when I look at that I might see myself as being a very well-adjusted individual, but I might have much more in common with people who face enormous difficulties navigating the world than I would have previously thought. So, after a lot of rambling, I've kind of reached the end of this point. And now the big question is, what to do about it? To what extent am I a pathological avoider of demands? And by the way, these demands could be placed on you, or could be internal demands, a sort of self-sabotage. You demand things of yourself and then avoid those demands. And that does seem a little Alice in Wonderland, and probably will require another film to get to the bottom of it. So that's it for this week. Let me know what you think. Otherwise, trust your lives are filled with joy. And until then, till next week, ciao from a sunny Brazil.